Welcome to Vision Chats, where the only thing that matters is the future. I'm Farouk, Vice Provost at Johns Hopkins University, and we are here for the final episode of Season 3 of Vision Chats. And I could not be more excited to have our guest who will close with us Season 3 today, Julie Lythcott-Haims, who many of you know. Hi, Julie. How are you as an author?
Nice to see you.
Read your books. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can't wait to dig in, but let me first tell people a little bit about you. So you're an author of several books, one that all of you need to go to your bookstores or Amazon and get, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. This one came after another book that you've written, How to Raise an Adult. And I know you've written also a personal memoir, Real American. And so you've transitioned into this author life after a pretty successful tenure at Stanford as the Dean of Freshmen. So you had an exciting run there. I worked at Stanford too, but our paths never crossed there. So I think I came after you had left. But your legacy, I tell you, is definitely all over the place there, and that so many people have speak so highly of you. Really, really excited to dig into this topic today. So, did this idea of trying to understand how young adults become adults and how the systems and families and people help them, did that start in your deanship years when did you start observing certain things that started getting these ideas together for you?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you. I've heard so much about you, Farouk, and it's beautiful to finally see your face and put the face with the name that I've heard so much about. And thanks to everyone who's decided to make us a part of their Thursday. I joined the Stanford campus as an administrator in 1998, and I stayed until 2012. And in those late 90s years, we began to notice that there were significant changes in the undergraduate population in the form of students who seemed less capable of doing the run-of-the-mill stuff of being a student, and parents who seemed to feel the need to step in. At first, we laughed about the parents because it was such a shift. They were wanting to call faculty to talk about a grade. They were wanting to register their student for class. And this was in the early days of parental over-involvement. And so it was silly. We just laughed about it, And then, of course, they grew in number, and we stopped laughing and really had to rethink, okay, parents seem to want to play a role in the day-to-day management of life. How are we as an institution going to respond? Are we going to sort of accept that change is underway, or are we going to try to hold some boundaries around what we hope and expect a student can do or can grow to be capable of doing? And of course, that led to a realization over the years on my campus and every campus that this concept of helicopter parenting was a real thing. It was changing childhood and therefore changing the way in which parents were viewing their role when their kid got to college or university. And my concern was with the parents' behavior, but only because of what I was seeing it doing to undermine student capability. And what I was honing in on was they seem to have less agency, the sense of I can or I can try. They seem to have less resilience. I can cope with the run-of-the-mill setbacks of life. And I really worried about the fact that they didn't seem to mind. Here I am, a member of Gen X. We hardly had parents anywhere, And I know if my parents had tried to over-attend my college experience, I would have shaken them off and said, what are you doing? This is my experience. But millennials were saying, yes, I'm delighted to have a parent or two helping me on this path. And I thought to myself, when are they going to hunger for their own right or the obligation, the responsibility to be in charge of themselves? And what if they don't? What will become of a set of humans who are forever handheld was my worry. Not being a psychologist, I'm a lawyer who became a university dean. My hunch was this is problematic at the level of the psyche, or it could be. And so, yes, these writings emerged from the observations, the conversations that I was having on my campus, and out of a deep empathy, I think, for all of us to make our own way ultimately, which is not to say that parents shouldn't always love their kids. Of course, that's important. And parents should be involved. Yes, it's a question of where's the line? When are you helping to such an extent that you are undermining the chance for your kid to thrive?
And that's how your term came eventually, is that like now putting the responsibility back on the individual.
It came, it's sort of a sequel to the overparenting
Yeah.
book. If the first book is for parents, this third book is definitely for young adults. But regardless of how they've been parented, it's in response to the plea from millennials, or the cry, I don't want to adult. Adulting is scary. I don't know how. This is me saying, okay, all of that is real. It is valid. It is your truth. Let me be a compassionate older person who sits with that and validates that, and then attempts to be in dialogue with you on the page about that and about what you want to do about that. Because you gotta be an adult. Adulting is simply being more or less responsible for yourself, whereas in childhood you are more or less the responsibility of someone else, assuming your parents have the basic wherewithal to be able to take care of business, food and shelter, and your safety, assuming that was available to you in childhood, which it isn't for everybody. And that's sad when that happens. The child often has to grow up sooner in that circumstance, becomes an adult sooner. You go from being more or less the responsibility of someone else to being more or less responsible for yourself, which is not to say you have to go it alone. It's that intrinsic sense of it's on me and I can. This apartment I'm paying for with my money. It may not be anywhere near as nice as the house I grew up in, but it's mine.
Yeah.
The stuff on the wall, I chose it. I get to decide what's in the refrigerator. I'm taking care of business. There's deep satisfaction that comes when we know we're taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, it's I totally agree, and I think that it's been interesting to watch how we've transitioned from shaming helicopter parenting, as you said, in the early '90s, and I remember all of those conversations, to trying to figure out how to channel it, to eventually transitioning into how to support it, and then to try to understand how the young adult goes through that journey and how we can be supportive of that. So I've definitely seen those transitions, and I'm happy that we're no longer shaming baby boomers as they parent millennials and now Gen Zs, and we're not shaming the young ones too. I know that the other observation that I've had over the years, and I'm sure you've had it too, is that this whole idea also looks different for different students of different groups. That certainly these are generalized themes, but there are some kids who've been forced to become adults at a very young age as a product of their own circumstances. That's something that you've seen also.
Yeah. So that's what I was alluding to. Right. There are some people who have to grow up sooner. So there are two things that I want to mention here. One is, well, they're sort of related. One is there's a relatively new branch or field or set of inquiries within the field of psychology around emerging adulthood. And a lot of us use that term. Well, they're emerging adults, adolescence goes until 24, 25. And we know that now. We know the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until those years, but that has always been true, or certainly been true for a long, long time as a fact of human evolution. We've only lately decided that, okay, so therefore they aren't capable of so much. And when you dig deep into the studies around emerging adulthood, you read evidence of this in affluent communities. You read it in communities where there is a safety net, where the young adult can transition into adulthood more slowly because there's a thickly woven safety net. And who doesn't have that thickly woven safety net? Poor kids, kids who come from families where they're experiencing trauma. There are all kinds of reasons why a kid might not have a safety net, and they grow up faster. And they have this accountability that I saw. So this is the second piece I saw on our campus, which had 15% of the undergraduates first gen college students, which had over 50% students on financial aid. A lot of students who had come from childhoods that were really characterized by struggle. Those kids had a greater sense of, I'm going to do this, I'm going to figure this out, I'm going to try, I can, I should, I must take care of business. Whereas their more affluent peers were texting a parent or two for the parent to handle it. And when people would say to me, so tell us about this helicopter parenting thing, where do you see it? In which populations? Is it racially based? Is it ethnically based? I said, you know what? I've seen it across ethnicities. I've seen it in Black families. I've seen it in Jewish families. I've seen it in Chinese families. I've seen it in all kinds of different folks. But, it's class-based largely, because overparenting is a function of extra time and extra money. Yeah. So if you, the parent, have that, you can deploy it to managing your child's every moment. And if you don't, your child has to fend for themselves sooner. And the long and short of it is, the kids who had to do it sooner had an extra tray in their toolkit when they got to college. They were more capable in a lot of ways, and they were more resilient, and they had a clear sense of how to navigate a bureaucracy, how to stand up for themselves, how to advocate with respect to an authority figure, because they'd had to practice it. They'd had to do it in childhood. And I'm not trying to romanticize poverty or gloss over all of the difficulties that might have attended the childhood I'm now describing. But I am here to say that when we can help those kids come to appreciate, hey, guess what? You may have some strengths you don't even realize are strengths because it's just the way you've lived life, but you are actually far more capable than a lot of people your own age who've had life easier. And, thinking about the pandemic as our current context, we can all lean into, okay, this has been a hardship. And for some of us, a significant hardship, and it has undermined and has overwhelmed, and it has made us stronger. Let's look at it and identify, what did I do? What was I capable of? What new skill did I learn the hard way because I had to? I take that with me. I take the memory of it with me, and I take the actual skill of it with me out into this new normal, whatever that may mean. So it just speaks to the importance that, that's the important role that struggle plays in the forging of a self. If we have a life that is easy and cushy and managed by others, it may be safer, it may be prettier, but there's something missing. The grit is missing, and we haven't kind of done the work to become this person who can ultimately lead their own life and be in charge of themselves.
Julie, the other observation that I have made personally over my years in higher education is that particular class or group of students who have been able to develop the skills of resilience as a result of their own life experiences also struggle with the area of figuring out what resources to use or how to use them, how to leverage university resources. And I think it brought to my own level of consciousness that really university systems and resources were built for the privileged class, that they were there as these peripheral resources for students to utilize, because we knew for a long time that students who attend our institutions, particularly the ones that are in the elite group, have their own networks and resources to use. And what we're seeing now is that students who come from underrepresented backgrounds, they often go through their entire 4 years as undergraduate students and not touch the resources that we've put together for them. That can be something as simple as academic advising or doing the extracurriculars that can have transformative impact on a student's life. But the privileged ones, they have reminders around them. They have parents who call my office and yours, and who are on them to take advantage of these things, and that. I think we started actually measuring that at Johns Hopkins. We started to see that leads to clear gaps in outcomes between these student groups.
Absolutely. And we have to work continually at understanding the ways in which our institutions have been built and rebuilt and shined and polished in order to serve the elite. Mm-hmm. We are all increasingly aware of that, and we are all, I think, if we're in this line of work, at the work of dismantling those things and really trying to ensure that everybody belongs. I mean, that was my ethos as a dean of freshmen was, I want to be sure everybody feels not just admitted, but let in. It's one thing to be admitted. Here you are. Welcome, 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 etc. Do this, do that. What does it take for somebody to feel truly let in or invited in, so that they will go for the resources when they need them, and they will reach for the stars. They will see that every aspect of support, every resource, and also every opportunity is theirs for the taking. There are so many hurdles that have to be overcome for a young person who isn't accustomed to privilege, to know that no, these things are here for you. What this calls to mind, Farouk, is when I was in law school, one of my two mentors in law school was Professor Charles Ogletree, nicknamed Tree, African-American and criminal justice oriented. And Tree and another one of his colleagues, African-American also, I think it was David Wilkins, had what they called Saturday School, which was a course basically on Saturday mornings, where you could come and learn the behind the scenes stuff that everybody else's parents had taught them. It was where you were going to learn the terminology associated with being a law student or being in a law school. How many students don't know as an undergrad, as of entering first year, what it means to be a professor versus a lecturer? What is a credit unit? What is a syllabus? Boy, the word syllabus, which is simply these are your assignments, is a term so many kids do not know. And it's such a barrier. It's like you're here you are, but you can't even understand what it is we're saying and trying to describe where your assignments are located. And Tree and his colleague put together the Saturday School for law students who might be the first in their family, or for any other reason, less prepared than others to just thrive from the start. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful offering. A way of saying, we want you to be members of this club, and there are some things you need to know in order to make it here. And I think that's what we're doing in student affairs, and that's what we're doing in academic advising, and why representation matters. I mean, I created this event at Stanford called Mid-Year Convocation for Freshmen. It was kind of a clunky term, but the point was, it's January, it's probably raining, the bloom is off the rose, you're no longer those apple-cheeked freshmen. We're all just, yay, you're here, welcome. It's like, no, it's real life. You've had a set of grades, and you're wondering, do I belong here? Do I want to be here? Is this all there is? Why am I not? I was acknowledging you may be feeling a set of things, and we're going to get real and talk about it. And I would open with a bit of a keynote, telling my own story about how I earned a B, a C, and a D fall quarter at Stanford. I had a 2.0, and I told the story about how that happened and how I was ashamed because I was Black and biracial from the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, and all the stereotype threat was heaped upon me. And I knew this was the proof that I didn't belong, that all the white folks in my community back home had intimated, oh, you just got in because you're Black, that they were right. Okay, that was the oppression heaped onto my being, and I believed it all, and I hid and shrank and was ashamed to be me. And then finally, I went to the advising office, and they reassured me that, no, you have what it takes, kid, but your study skills need a lot of work, and your time management, and let's help you with some workshops and some mentoring, and take classes that you love instead of what you think you have to take. And I tell that story about the struggle, the shame, and then finally turning it around. And I said to them, I'm not presuming you're going to fail or get a D like I did. I'm saying, if you do, remember this story. You are not alone. It happens to people for all kinds of reasons. The shame isn't in getting the D. The shame is in hiding when you're struggling and failing to seek out the resources. We are all here for your benefit. So please come. And know that if you do, you've got people on the other side of the door who can relate. This is why we do the work. So this goes to how essential it is. We talk about representation matters. We talk about it around race and sexual orientation and ethnicity and religion and socioeconomic status and all of these aspects of our identity. And what we're saying is, when somebody else has trodden the same life path, We create a bond of trust. The students can see someone like me has done this. I can too, right? I can look up to this person. I can learn from the various steps that they took and the various lessons that they learned. And ultimately that's what I'm trying to do in this new book, Your Turn. I'm trying to say, look, I'm older, I'm not wiser, but I've lived more of life than you, and I've learned a lot, and I want to pass on some of these lessons that I've learned and that people I've interviewed for this book have learned, so that maybe we can help your path be a little smoother.
Yeah, this speaks so much to me, Julie, in so many ways that you have no idea that this is really about normalizing not only failure, but just normalizing not being okay sometimes,
Yeah.
and not feeling okay, and not feeling like right in your skin, and normalizing just having a hard time, and trying to figure out how to get through it. And part of it, you're right, is to learn those basic skills of how to lean into resources and get some help. But I think part of it too is normalizing how the community can recognize the struggles and circle the around the person or the people, and try and offer help. I think sometimes what I've seen happen too many times is when someone is struggling, the community around, sometimes, especially in these types of communities where it's easy to feel like you don't belong, is the first reaction people go to is, well, you don't seem happy here. Maybe you would be happier elsewhere. And you hear that sometimes, and that is tough. So how we can just basically peel all of these layers and rebuild, that is really what you're speaking to. Julie, you were the dean of belonging before belonging was a word. Weren't you?
I was. I mean, I tried to be. I certainly came from that perspective. And look, Farouk, my own personal narrative is, if I may, yeah, I've really sort of begun to unpack this only recently. When people have asked, why are you interested in these topics you write about? And where does this sense of, I want to help humans on their path come from? I'm hardly the only person that wants that. I'm hardly the only person in a helping profession, but we all have our why for doing it. And mine, I think, is I'm born to an African-American father and a white British mother in the 60s, in a time when their love, their marriage, and their decision to have a child was transgressive. They violated laws by being married. Okay, I arrive on the planet presumed to be problematic because of my DNA, because of my skin color. Not problematic in the eyes of everyone, but in the eyes of many. In 1967, in the eyes of many, I was a problem. And so I have always lived outside the lines. I have never been contemplated by society's classification of humans. And I think this sense of, what are you, and why do you look the way you do? And, all of those questions that are so invasive and presume, maybe you shouldn't be here, have led me to feel deeply for anybody who finds themselves in those margins or outside those lines. And it certainly animated my sense of what an undergraduate experience should strive to do, should strive to ensure that those traditionally marginalized are no longer. And it's not just something you put in a policy statement or throw some dollars toward. It is fundamentally about humans showing up with humans with a care and concern in their spirit that says, I'm glad you're here. And it's my job to ensure that here is where you can be, right? It's my job to ensure that this environment is one where you can be cherished as you are. We're not going to be a place that asks you to change so that you can belong here, right? There's so many centuries old traditions. I'm picturing Ivy League, like, you have to conform, you have to be of this or that to belong here. We've thrown that shit out in a lot of ways, or we should, right? We are now in an American moment where we're saying everybody deserves to know they are cherished. Everybody matters. We certainly want everybody to. So we have to do the work to figure out, why don't people feel they matter? What are the barriers that we don't even see, right? My friend Nicole Sanchez, who runs Via Consulting, a DEI consulting firm out here in the Bay Area, taught me that if an organization wants to really understand where the invisible or less visible barriers are, you need to talk to the people who embody the greatest number of intersections in their identity. You need to ask your trans kids of color. You need to ask your poor queer kids or your poor kids of color. You need to go to those folks and say, hey, I'm interested in your thriving here. I would like to know what it's like to be you, but I can't know what it's like to be you because I'm not you. But I want you to know that I care deeply about the extent to which you are thriving here or not. And if you feel you can, perhaps now, perhaps later, and maybe you don't feel you can, but if you feel you can, I would like to listen to you tell me, where do you feel you can be completely yourself here? And where do you feel you can't? Because it's my job to understand where you can't, and it's my job to do something about it.
That is powerful. And for as much as I want to believe that that's the direction that we should go, I'm also, and I'm sure you think of that all the time too, I'm also aware that there's quite a bit of resistance to that very idea of restructuring our systems so that people feel like they belong all of the time. And we see it now in all of the conversations around critical race theory and what we're teaching kids in school versus not. And I mean, you went to law school, so I know you know what where the race theory really is and where it's taught and where it's not taught.
Right.
But it's fascinating how it's really less about critical race theory and more about the narrative that is being out there of how society is changing and how do we keep it from changing to benefit all. That is an area I know that concerns me deeply as we bring more young adults into our college systems. There is this bigger conversation that still throws these ideas out to make people still question whether they're in the right place or not.
Yeah. I'm so saddened by how critical race theory has become sort of the piñata of the right. They're just taking a swing at it and they don't even understand what it is. I did learn about critical race theory, which of course goes back decades and is simply it's a lens that says race is a fundamental element in American democracy, in American society, in the configuration of America as America. Race and racism was one of the theories used to build and construct this place, to take land and to enslave people and to build an economy that didn't pay for the land or the labor, and it informs so much. It's just putting a filter, like you have your lens and it's like, let's put this filter in place to remind us of these issues so that we can more thoughtfully view, the various things that have happened. It's, it counteracts the other views that were in place, which is that it's just about capitalism and it's supply and demand, and that's all that matters. I mean, that's a theory. Anyway, so the right has taken it, and as is the case today, Farouk, across so many dimensions, people are hearing about something, they're not investigating it, they're listening to an influencer or a pundit, and they're deciding, oh, okay, I now believe this. I think we have a terrific absence of critical thinking happening right now, and our universities have to be the places that always hold space for difficult conversations to be had. And I know, look, I left Stanford in 2012. We weren't yet encountering trigger warnings. When I left, were barely a thing, and safe spaces were barely being talked about. And of course, that has become the hallmark of the last 8 or 10 years on campuses. And I am that dean saying, or that former dean saying, yeah, we want to be sure you feel safe and you feel this is home. And we got to talk about some really difficult things. And so let's not plug our ears and say, I can't talk about this. Let's try to talk about it respectfully, intellectually. Let's engage. Let's be thoughtful. But we must always be a place where ideas can be exchanged. If we lose that at the level of our universities and colleges, we undermine this democracy even more than it is already being undermined. And so
Yeah.
I'm here for the difficult conversations, and I don't think that having difficult conversations and creating safe spaces are mutually exclusive.
Mhm.
I think whether a space is safe is about the care and concern that goes into having the dialogue and having the follow-up and helping people talk through what they believe. And I think that's our job as people in academia.
Yeah, and I've resented over the years how the notion of just even safe space has been linked to the snowflake idea that, apparently creating safe spaces for students to be who they are, to explore who they are, to think about these tough conversations, is enabling them to be weak, as snowflakes. And I've just resisted that, because that all we're saying is we're creating an environment where you can make mistakes as you explore these things, and there's not going to be danger on you, physical, the danger of harm, physical or emotional,
Right.
or to your status,
Right.
because these are tough conversations. That, for me, and also to explore who you are and who you want
Yep.
to be.
Yep.
That is this whole thing is about being an adult, is
Yeah.
to think about where you come from, who you are today, and where you want to go, to construct this life of yours, in an environment that's not going to present harm to you in any shape or form. So I don't know how, like, it just gone into this, because I've seen it in the early days where it started to be a real thing, like safe spaces, then brave spaces, then we want to comfort people and we want to help them out, we want to help them explore these things, and then turned into, oh, we're enabling them to be weak,
Mm.
and we shame them for being
Mm.
who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. I not being on a campus anymore. I can literally only imagine what it is like to navigate these spaces. And yet I'm so comforted by knowing how many amazing people are in student affairs and academic advising and first year experience and all of that, and community centers, and talk about being on the forefront of human development. What I want to say about safe spaces, or about snowflakes, the term is the irony that those on the right have been calling those on the left snowflakes and too sensitive, and, oh, you need things, just your way. These are the very people who have decided critical race theory is problematic. And they are being snowflakes, to use their own term, about the fact that American history has some really difficult aspects to it. And they don't want to accept that. They don't want to hear it. They want to be like, la, 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 America's fine. Don't tell me it's not. Right? They are themselves embodying the very fragility they accuse those on the left of embodying. And I think, the bigger point here is, let's stop labeling. Let's stop reducing everything to simple terms that we think we understand. Let's lean into the fact that everybody needs to learn a whole lot, and everybody should feel safe and seen and validated as they are. And we are different from one another, and those differences are real and valid, and we may never agree, but we can be respectful. We don't have to turn it into hate. There are ways to be human with humans who are completely different from us, that aren't about everybody believing the same thing, but everybody at least agreeing to some basic terms of decency about how to be around one another and how to have conversation about tough things. The other thing that I want to say, the irony that I'm reminded of, is these same people, and I'm doing sweeping generalizations about the left and the right. On the right, there's been this maligning of affirmative action for years. They say, you are being given spots that you do not deserve. You're being given a leg up, and that's not fair, they have said to people like me. And yet The oldest form of affirmative action in this country is the Electoral College.
Yeah.
The Electoral College, which gives more weight to these small states than to the big states. It is saying you need a leg up. We need to make sure, right? And to kids of donors in an admissions context, and to kids of alumni who have always gotten a leg up, and nobody talks about the racial issues attached to those decisions. And so there's just such a hypocrisy, in these critiques. It's like you see it in the other group, but you're not willing to see it in yourself. And frankly, I think there are lessons in there for everybody.
Yeah, and these and and I go back to the your comment earlier that these are the conversations that need to have space on college campuses to help all of us grow, but also to help these young adults really start to form not only their own identities but their own perceptions, hopefully based on reality, and their own ideas of of a more ideal world that is much more inclusive and fair. And you're absolutely right. Like all of these issues, and we've lived through them probably for the last 4 years in a more intense way than we have before. Because they became more obvious now. But I always say, and I'm sure you do too, that it's not that we're seeing more of that these things are happening more, is that we're just seeing them more because people are talking about them more, and that they have license to, and they're being filmed more, etc. So now these are all realities that are coming in. They're facing all of us as we try to grow. Julie, as I was going through all of your talks and your books, etc., what it made me realize is that I was still trying to figure out how to be an adult, even like in my mid-40s, and that was a really interesting notion for me, because when I first looked at it, I was thinking about all of your work to be about the young adult, but really you're really addressing issues of how we just imagine our life and how we construct it and how we bring meaning to it. So you're trying to answer a question of who do I want to be, who am I, and what I want to be in this world that is ever changing, and recognizing all of its issues, etc. So that's a conversation I think we should all try to get into, is how do we design careers and lives, personal and professional, as we move forward, especially after an interesting and a challenging year that we've had. We've been in a year and a half of a pandemic that has thrown everything back up in the air, and now the chips are falling where they may. We're starting to see the early signs of what people are calling the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, the Great something. Everything is coming back to, is being linked back to the Great Migration of the 1920s. Race aside, there are probably some elements there that are common about trying to seek a better life, a different life where we belong, where we can be successful. And that's where everybody's trying to do now. And I can see it all in higher education, but also in a variety of industry sectors that I'm engaging with, is that people really are reevaluating and reassessing their lives and where they want to go. And they're kind of like going through their second or third phase of adulthood. Like, where am I going to be? So what can we learn from your work that can help all of us?
I did write this for those who are known for saying, I don't want to adult, I can't adult, adulting is hard, tend to be on the younger side. But in the 3 months the book has been out, what I keep hearing is, I'm older and I'm resonating with this book. And I think that's absolutely logical. It makes sense. The book is basically how to live your best life as an adult, which is a time, as I've said, when you're more or less responsible for yourself. And then you die. I mean, this is adulting, is you survive childhood, you're an adult, and then life ends at some point. And I'm trying to just, lean into what makes life sweet and good. And there's nothing like hardship in whatever form to sharpen our understanding of what matters to us. And we're always needing to do this balance between what's practical and what's possible. And so emerging out into this strange new normal, emerging out into an economy that is different and troubling, there are practical realities, like, maybe you need to take some classes in coding, because coding today is what knowing how to type was when I was coming up in the 80s. Doesn't mean you're going to be a coder, but it's good to have a little bit of familiarity. What are the practical choices you need to make in order to have confidence that you are kind of establishing yourself as someone who can thrive in this milieu? Maybe it's, I need to move to a part of the country that is less susceptible to climate change. I need to move to a part of the country that has jobs for young people and an affordable cost of living. I'm talking to you from the San Francisco Bay Area, and my own kids probably can't afford to live in this city, in this area, when they graduate college, because wages and salaries have not kept up with the cost of living here. And that is true for so many young people. Cannot afford to live where they grew up. Fine. Maybe we need to take a deep breath and accept that reality, pod up with some friends, because a lot of folks did that during the pandemic. They took classes virtually. They know how to live with one another and run a household. Let's all move to wherever, Columbus, Boise, I'm not sure. Google best places to live for young adults, where the jobs are, where there's nightlife, where there's great quality of life, and cost of living is reasonable, and decide together, we are going to set up a life for ourselves here. I mean, that's a huge decision. And I don't say it glibly, like just move somewhere else. I'm trying to acknowledge the big realities, the systemic realities around our socioeconomic issues, the widening income inequality, climate change, and say, you have agency. You can make choices in furtherance of your wellness, in furtherance of your thriving, in furtherance of your opportunity. And I think one of the core voices or the core messages in this book is, it's your life. And yes, that's terrifying, but guess what? It's liberating. You get to decide. It doesn't matter what everybody else thinks is the right thing to do. Take a deep interest in your own inner voice that says, this is what I'm good at. These are the things I'm really good at. And these are the things I love. My life has taught me work must be an intersection of those two circles, what I'm good at and what I love. I actually draw this diagram in the book. If you're just good at the work, like you're great at math, you should be an engineer. If you don't love that work, you're going to feel like a drone in your own life. I was a corporate lawyer who was young in the field, but apparently good at it. They were mentoring me, grooming me. I didn't love it. It didn't matter how much money they paid me. I was miserable. I had high blood pressure. I had a knot in my stomach every Sunday. Okay. You have to also love what you do, or you want to. You hope to, have enough opportunity and privilege in life such that you can make these choices. I realize being able to contemplate this presumes your basic quality of life is there in terms of food and shelter. Okay. Once you have that, you can lean into, what do I love? You have to love it as well in order for the work to be meaningful. If you just love it and you're not good at it, you'll never make a living at it. So you're looking for that sweet spot of, what am I good at? What do I love? And let me go in that direction. And that inquiry with the self is available to us all. I think we should continually be asking it. Am I still doing work I'm good at and love? If not, where do I need to retool? Where do I want to level up? Where do I want to make a lateral move to, so that I can have that confidence that the work that I'm doing, which in a capitalist society is how we spend much of our lives, is work that is intrinsically meaningful to me. And so that I can feel, I'm living a life that feels really good to me.
I think that what the challenge that a lot of people go to is how do I figure out what I love? And that is actually, one of the top questions that graduating young adults from colleges have, but also a lot of that's one of the top questions that people have, like especially during this as we come out of the pandemic and this great reshuffled area where people are feeling braver to make big decisions, but they're like, but I'm not sure exactly what it is that I love. And it feels like it's only the few who get to stumble onto that area of passion. I mean, I don't know how so yes, you were miserable in the career you were in. How did you stumble into the things that just fed you that? Like, it's figuring out what are the signals that tell me this is what I love?
Part of it was I was miserable. And when we are miserable, that's often when we're willing to access our inner voice
Yeah.
that is trying to yell at us, I'm miserable. Okay. So, but we don't have to wait until our hair is falling out or we have high blood pressure or our bodies are showing stress in other ways. We can develop a mindfulness practice, or, a journaling practice, or just taking walks by ourselves and having conversations with ourselves, or long showers where the water is just hitting you in the head and there isn't really anything else going on and you can think. And what we need to be asking ourselves in these moments are things like, you're trying to ask yourself a question that jostles the truth out of yourself. So you might ask, okay, if it was just up to me, what would I do for work? If my parents' views were not relevant, what would I do? And just framing it like that, often the answer will come, particularly if there are barriers of other people's expectations. Oh, you should be an accountant. Oh, you should be a doctor. Oh, you should, don't be an artist. Like when you can acknowledge that those voices are there, but you're saying for a moment, what if they weren't there? What would I do? Often ourself will tell ourselves, oh yeah, we want to be a wilderness naturalist. I'm an outdoors person. I love the water. I love forests. I need to go. And everyone in your life is saying, that's not valid. That's not real. You shouldn't do that. The more you can say, you know what, to hell with that. I am interested in that. And guess what? People do that work. It's not like saying, I want to go live on Mars. No, people actually are wilderness naturalists. Maybe I will be one of them. I'm going to go check that out. I'm going to inquire. I'm going to learn more. I'm going to have an informational interview with a person who does that work. In the same vein, people, know, like, I want to be on the front lines to help humans who are suffering. I want to be an EMT. And everybody's saying, oh, you want to be an EMT? Why don't you go for the big job and be a doctor? Doctors don't have frontline work caring for the human spirit the way a nurse or an EMT does. They have expertise, to be sure. But when you want to be frontline with somebody who's, just on the right, you're their main person, EMT nurse might be the way you want to go. If you want to be a social worker, and people are like, you don't take out loans to be a social worker, you'll never pay off those loans. I'm here to say America needs social workers, y'all, everywhere. Be a social worker, but don't expect to live on a social worker salary in a place where it's super expensive to rent an apartment. Go be a social worker in a community where you can afford to be a social worker. Okay. That's the trade-off. And it's not even a trade-off. It's a choice. I want to do this work. And in order to be able to do this work, I'm going to have to live somewhere where it's affordable for me to do this work and where they need this work to be done. Those are the meta questions. And when the self is saying it's social work, it's wilderness, it's theater, I don't care what it is. You may want to be an investment banker and you come from a family of artists who are ridiculing you. Go be the investment banker. To hell with the family of artists and just, do your best to help them understand why you love it. But it's your life. And the more we can give ourselves permission to be ourselves and decide, this is the work that I do. I don't care if people laugh. This is my identity. I don't care if they're prejudiced against me. I am this person, and I'm going to choose to be in workplaces and in school environments and in communities and in relationships where I can be myself. This book is rooting for the individual to be who you are. Yes, there are challenges and constraints that are largely out of your control, like climate and widening inequalities and all of these things, but you are you, and you have so much to do with the choices you make and the path you will craft for yourself. And I'm rooting for everybody to do that.
Wow, I hope you are here catching all of that, everybody. I'm here for it. I love it, Julie. So here's what I tell students, and I've been also telling parents this, and I think it aligns perfectly with what you're sharing. Your job is not to figure out what you want to do. Your job is to be inspired. And often when I hear someone telling me, whether they're an adult or a young adult, or like they're on their third career, or and they're asking the question, I don't know what I love, or I'm trying to figure out what I'm passionate about, trying to find my passion. I'm like, good luck finding it. It's not out there. It's not
Right.
a
It's
scavenger
on the
hunt.
bookshelf. Here it is. Here's my passion.
Yeah, it's not like that. But I think so. Your job isn't to try to figure out or predict what you will be, is to be inspired. And what I often find is that people lack that inspiration. If they tell me they don't know, immediately I ask them the question, what are you inspired by, or what have you been inspired by lately? And they usually, have a blank stare, like that they're not sure exactly what to do with that. And that usually is a signal that they are lacking experiences and in deep engagement, doubling down on areas of deep curiosity of them. So that is the work that it starts. Is you must be curious about something that you either suppressed,
Yeah.
put on the shelf, put aside. You've been told
Yeah.
by family or society that you can't
Right.
be curious about that.
That's
Let's
right.
double down on that and
Right.
do things
Right.
to allow that to come out of the
Right.
ground.
Right. I
Is
have a
that
couple of
resonating?
thoughts. Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who taught us about flow. And at Stanford, there's this class, Designing Your Life, taught by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. They've written a book, international bestseller, Designing Your Life. And I got to co-teach that class with them for a couple of quarters before I left. And we would teach our students about flow, that state you're in when you lose track of time, when there's a challenge, but it's not a daunting challenge, but it's enough of a challenge that it kind of pulls you through.
Yeah.
You lose track of time, you lose a sense of thirst or hunger, and you're just in the zone or in the groove, as athletes and musicians say. In flow is the term that isn't about sports or music, but just sort of whatever it is that's pulling you through. And when you ask students, when were you last in flow? Our students often said, I think middle school, which was so sad because like they've been so hardworking and so high achieving and go, go, go. But when you ask them, when were you in flow, that is pulled into the thing intrinsically because of the thing, not because you had to or you're studying for this, right? They were like middle school. We want to get back to when we're, and childhood is often the source of this self-knowledge. Like, I really loved rocks. Yeah. Okay, maybe you still love rocks. Maybe you're intrigued by the geology of the earth. Maybe you want to go in that direction somehow. Knowing when you were in flow, this is a clue to how you like to be, the type of work you like to do. Maybe you're a data person. Maybe you love people. Maybe you love working with money. Maybe you love writing. Maybe you love advocacy. Who knows, right? But knowing the topics you care about, I care about poverty, great. You want to end poverty? Do you want to be an economist who works in ending poverty? Do you want to be a writer who works in ending poverty? Do you want to be a social worker? Do you want to be a data? I don't, a zillion jobs that can be about tackling this systemic blight called poverty. So it's this deep curiosity. It's Let's Open the Week, which is a wonderful weekly magazine that summarizes the week's news, international, national, arts and culture, funny stuff, weird stuff, science, like everything. It's this beautiful magazine. I would say to students who truly have no idea, take this copy of the week, read it in its entirety, and tell me the top 3 things you're interested in from it. Just to stimulate, oh yeah, you really care about what's happening to the rainforest and so. Oh, you really care about this painting, done by this Black artist who did a, like, let's try to stimulate your own self-awareness about what matters to you.
I love it. That is the advice to everyone. And like I have 3 children at home, and that's at times I hear these areas of curiosities from them, and even I, who subscribe to all of these things, I go, what? Where is that going to go? And then I have to remind myself that this is the time to double down on these things when they show these areas of curiosity. I love the word you're using, is it stimulate them, like just get them to do more in these areas. Engage in a community, engage with people, engage in experiences until you see that reaction of inspiration. When they are inspired, they can't let it go anymore.
That's right.
And it's at that point that if you are inspired or if you're around someone who's inspired, the only job is to create an environment where they can take some risks.
Yeah.
And this brings it back to the conversation we had earlier, which I think is the future role of higher education, or one of them, the many roles of higher education, is to create environments where it is equitable for all to be able to take risks when they are inspired.
Yeah.
And because we're creating environments for inspiration, no question about it. We're teaching them classes, they got out of it and their heads are going, whoa, they're reading these books, they're meeting with people like you and professors and alumni and companies, and they work on projects, they get inspired. So they, they take that curiosity and turning into inspiration. And then now it's about what, this is what I call around Johns Hopkins and in my talks, making an audacious move, take some risk, do something now with that inspiration.
Yeah.
And then you have the few who get to start the startups, and others who just have too many things in their lives to figure out how to unpack. So we're coming full circle back here of what is the future of learning? What is the future of higher education? It's to take it that step, one step further. It's not just equitable access to learning. It's equitable access to do something with that learning.
Yeah, I love that. So inspiration, risk-taking in the context of an equitable environment that ensures that those inspiration and risk-taking possibilities or imperatives are available fully to all.
That's it. I think that's how universities need to change. So final question, Julie. So transitioning into your first book, how was that for you? Like you like writing your first book was something new. They're like, how do I get started with this? How do I do
Farouk, a totally different conversation. Look, I was told
that was your audacious move.
I didn't write well. I was told that. I wrote very passively. I think it's because I didn't read for pleasure. I think I have an undiagnosed learning disability. So let's just dial it all the way back. I listened in my classes in high school, in college. I listened to what other people said because I had such a hard time parsing the written word myself. And I have done the work to push through those difficulties, and I have become a voracious reader. So my writing improved. But if you had said to me at 17 or 24 or 34, you will be a published author one day, I would have laughed. I knew I could speak at this level. I was always praised for that, but my written sentences were quite passive. And frankly, it wasn't until I did the work on myself around my self-loathing, the internalized oppression that I discovered within myself at 39. It wasn't until I shed that self-loathing and became this self-loving Black woman that I found my voice and was able to write. So that is a very microcosmic description of the process. But I finally began to write because I could. Look, I wrote an op-ed about the harm of helicopter parenting in the Chicago Tribune, 2005. My book on the same subject, 2015, 10 years later. But I was deeply interested in that issue and what we needed to do about it for 10 years. And so I went back to school. I got an MFA. I got some confidence. I developed the craft further. I was in community with other writers. I gave myself permission to give it a try. And I had a safety net. I had a partner who had a job. And so it was a privilege to leave the university and go to grad school at 44. But man, did I love it. I couldn't leave. I stayed 4 years in a program that is meant to be 2. And I wrote 2 books in that time. And I'm loving getting to write about the things that matter to me, getting to be in community with people who care about these topics that I try to write and speak about. And so, I'm in my 3rd career, and I don't know if there's a 4th or 5th. I'm loving what I'm doing right now, as I loved what I did when I got to be a dean on a university campus. I loved that work tremendously as well. I'm trying to learn and grow until I take my last breath, and I want that for all of us, actually.
Amazing. Was that a continuing ed program or a regular?
It was a regular. It was at California College of the Arts up in San Francisco, and I enrolled in their MFA in writing program, and it was a fantastic school. And it taught me, frankly, having been affiliated with elite schools all my life, being the proud graduate of those places. I think I worried when I went That's it's so hard to say this. I'm going to say it because I'm through it. I think I worried, like, is this going to be good enough? Is this going to be,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not the elite brand.
Yeah.
And that fear went away in about 20 minutes on campus, where I discovered smart, intellectually engaged people who were thoughtful and kind and fascinating. And there was rigor and there were expectations, right? And I realized the shame came like, oh, you snob. You
Yeah.
were afraid that this place wasn't going to offer the same juice you were used to, having come from these elite spaces. And I had that smacked out of me
Yeah.
and leaned in and felt such belonging in that community. And I will forever be grateful to California College of the Arts for holding me as I was trying to forge this new identity, for pushing me and pulling me and holding me also. I will never forget those classmates and those instructors.
Wow. Julie, thank you for saying that and for your authenticity and for just calling that out, just not only in you, but also I think you've just given permission to a lot of people, including myself, who have had those thoughts to, you've just normalized it, normalized those feelings for a lot of us. So thank you for doing that. I had an amazing time this hour. It just went by so quickly, and I learned a ton from you. You are everything that I heard you were and more. And there's just so much learning that comes from you, and I can't wait to see where your third chapter, your third career, and then your next one will take you, and all of the great accomplishments that will come out of all of the great work you're doing. You're impacting so many people close and far. And I see that you have some former students who joined us today too.
I saw that.
I feel like you have a fan club out there. I know you know it, but
Sylvie Rousseau shouted out, may the students just call me Dean Julie. So that was lovely to see, and said that she was a part of the class of 2010, which I would shout, oh, 10, which I know sounds strange, but we had this call and response around class identity. There we go, Sylvie.
Let me just say that every college needs to have a dean of freshmen who / belonging, and you were the OG. You were the original one, and I saw it after you left. I was at Stanford for almost 6 years after you left, and saw the impact of the classes that you have nurtured as a dean of freshmen. And I think every single campus needs a role like that, and a Julie on their campus that helps raise these adults to send them into the world. So wonderful work that you've done.
Farouk, you're so kind. And I want to say I loved the work, and I was delighted to be with hundreds of other colleagues on campus who were doing the work. And, to be a higher ed administrator is to have the privilege of being alongside humans unfolding. And it's a process that can be ugly before it's beautiful. And compassion is required. And what a privilege it is. So thank you for inviting me back into this space. I miss higher ed. I love what I'm doing. Those are the realities. We make choices, and we have our experiences, and we learn and grow. So I appreciate your having me. Really great to finally meet you in person, and really thank you to everybody who joined us. There were a lot of great comments in the chat, and really love this series and honored to be a part of it. Farouk, thank you.
This is wonderful. Well, this was season 3 of Vision Chats with the best closer ever. Thank you, Julie, again. And I always finish my Vision Chats with the same statements. The only vision that matters is the one that you create. So go on this summer, create and construct and design your vision for the future, and make a great impact. Thank you, Julie, for inspiring us. Thank you for all of our guests. And we'll see you at season 4 in the fall. Bye.
Bye.